Hi and welcome. Good morning, everyone. This is Seek Sustainable Japan and our monthly, but we missed one last month, our monthly sub-series, Short Takes. Now, I'm JJWalsh, based here in Hiroshima, Japan, and
Hi, I'm Tove Joy, usually based in Yokohama, but today I'm in Tokyo.
now we are catching up after a very busy and hot summer. Both of us have been to other countries and have ideas to bring back. But you might notice my nails have a little tinge. So I just got back. Once I came back from Hawaii, I went to Tokushima and I had an indigo dye experience. So you can see some of
Oh,
the residue still from the indigo. But it was fascinating because I got to see from growing the indigo plants to
wow.
processing and fermenting the indigo, and then what happens with this place, they put it right back to the fields. So
Mm,
it was wonderful to see that like circularity, like so clearly in mind of
yeah.
the person doing it. And so that was nice to see after being in America. We were talking about before we went live, so many vegetarian options, vegan options abroad. And then when you come back, you're like, come on, Japan, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Any big
Very much.
takeaways from your trip, Tova? You
Um,
went to Europe, right?
yeah, so we've just been looking at universities with my daughter. So we were in Austria, Vienna for a few days, and then the Netherlands, various places there, and then finally visiting family in the UK. So it was a really interesting opportunity to kind of look at how sustainability is showing up there, just in sort of daily lives and the places we stayed and visited and what we sort of saw around us. And like you said, the food was a big one, right? The food. Oh, that was Amsterdam Pride. The picture you're showing at the moment. We were just coincidentally there for Pride, which was amazing. Um, and quite different because we've been to Tokyo Pride, many times, and so it was really interesting just reflecting on what was different. And I think when we see it in Tokyo, okay, it's sort of a newer thing here, and it's very much in a small area. And when you do the parade, it's just on this sort of cordoned off bit on the street, and it's very sort of tightly controlled. Um, what you can do. And there it just felt like the whole sort of weekend of the celebrations, the whole city was just absolutely buzzing. And yes, there was the main parade along all the canals with the boats. A lot of the boats there were 100% electric. It said on the side, which was great to see. And one boat on the side of it said something like melting discrimination, not ice caps or something like that,
Wow.
which was really nice, but
And then
quite different.
also such a cycle-friendly city, right?
Yes,
Everything's focused on the bicycles.
bicycles everywhere. So these we loved. We saw many variations of these cargo bikes or bucket bikes, and we were sort of looking at how many different ways we saw them used. So we saw, of course, people sort of taking their kids around in them. We saw dogs in them. We saw people with their shopping and carrying stuff around. We saw one guy with what we assumed was his elderly mother going along in the bucket
It's
bike.
amazing.
It's amazing. There
Yeah.
were ones with hoods. There were just sort of
Yeah.
open
And
ones.
a lot of Dutch people who come and I do tours for in
Mm,
Hiroshima, they often mention that it wasn't always a cycle-friendly place, that it
right.
was a big change
Yeah.
from a car central city like most of the
Mm,
world, and
yep.
then making the decision, the
Mm,
government making the decision, no,
yeah.
we are going to be cycle-friendly, making cycle-friendly lanes,
Yep.
everything's very clear. It
Yeah.
can be done. This is a great model for everywhere.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, you mentioned the lanes, but also things like it's really easy to take your bike on the train, and the trains there, just sort of the big, main trains going from city to city, all have sort of space for you to take your bike. So we saw so many people just hop on with their bike, hop
Yeah.
off at the next place, and then off they go on their
And
bike.
and same in Hawaii, the
Yeah.
transportation's not great.
Mm.
They just got their new rail going. Yay, after
Yeah.
20 years. But any public bus, you can put your bicycle on the front of the bus.
Yeah.
So you can use your
Yeah.
bicycle all over the island. I
Yeah.
mean, there are simple solutions we could put in
Mm.
place in
Yeah.
Japan as well.
Yeah, no, that was really great to see. And a lot of sort of electric assisted bikes and stuff as well, so it makes it easier if people, you know, do find it hard on a normal bike. So my knees are falling apart. I struggle with normal bikes, particularly if there's a hill, but that kind of thing takes that excuse away, right? It's like, oh,
And then in Hawaii too, there was electric mobility. So when you go to, like, we went to the Waimea Falls, Waimea Valley, and it's a beautiful place where you can learn about indigenous culture. You can see the waterfall, and they have electric wheelchairs that anybody who has mobility issues can use and go all the way up to the waterfall, or you can use their electric service bus and pay a little bit and go up in the service bus. So these are also things we need to think about in Japan with the elderly population and making it more accessible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of options out there. And I know one company we worked with last year, actually, in Tokushima, where you've just been recently, was looking at could they repurpose the electric, what are they called? Golf buggies. To help elderly move around, kind of when they maybe are unable to drive in these rural areas, but there's no bus service or anything like that. They're like, we could use these things and they can follow a track. So interesting to see sort of what starts to happen.
Absolutely. And you probably saw in Europe, I saw in Hawaii, there is a boom in electric cars. Every other car I saw looked like an electric car. There's charging places everywhere. But also, like you mentioned, the golf buggies, people who live in small communities are using these kind of golf buggies with license plates to get around short distances. I mean, why not? Right? It was a great idea.
Very practical. Very practical.
We also saw these great, very simple water fountains in every park, water places to refill. You've got a special one for your water bottle. You just fill it up without touching anything, without having to get your mouth next to something. So this is standard. It has been for a long time in Hawaii and California and many other places. So this is a big issue in Japan. We still don't have places to fill up, right?
Not enough. And I know my Mies were working hard to change that. But it would be good to see more availability of that, particularly with this heat.
Absolutely. Japan Times has had a new series they started this year, all about the heat and talking about all the problems with not enough hydration. A lot of people are dehydrated already. And then you've got these high temperatures, hottest ever summers, and you're having a lot more heat stroke. All the problems that the ambulance services are having, the hospitals are having with all the people coming in. And then correlate that with the higher electricity prices, people not using their air conditioning. A lot of elderly who live alone are dehydrated and heat stroke at home. So something like encouraging, having public service announcements, hydrate, refill your bottle. Having these refill stations is a kind of public service announcement too. Come and refill your bottle. Like, not just, people are feeling the crunch economically. You don't have to buy a bottle of drink, just refill, and people drink more because it's free and available, right?
Exactly. When you think sort of bigger picture and the positive benefits of that, like you say, for health services and things like this and easing the burden, then it does make a lot of sense to put that initial investment in.
Absolutely. And one of the things I got really excited about while I was in Hawaii was seeing the Oahu Resilience, Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency Office as part of the government. And they have a new initiative, which is coming into action in 2025 in April, that all the green bins, which now you can put all your garden cuttings and from the parks and everything, grass and leaves, but they're also going to add compostable containers. So all places that have takeout food, it has to be a compostable container. All takeout drinks has to be a compostable container. And from next year, you can put that in the green bin and your kitchen waste as well. So really uptick in what is accepted as recyclable. So they say now they have only about 26% of their waste is recyclable. And so once they start accepting compostables, that's going to go up probably about 30% more. So
Wow,
they
that's
have
brilliant.
these
Yeah.
clear targets. By 2045, they want to be carbon
Yeah.
neutral. So
Yeah.
this is one of the ways they're moving forward. This is
Yeah.
what we need to see happening in Japan too, right?
Yeah, I would love to see, the compostable part, I think, has a lot of benefits. I mean, we're lucky enough to have sort of a bit of outside space at home where we are that we can, sort of do our own composting there. So I've had bokashi bins for years now there, which don't smell or anything. But what we've noticed actually as a sort of a side benefit of that is our normal bin in the kitchen doesn't smell anymore, because it used to, particularly in the summer when it's hot like this, right? If there was any food waste, namagomi as we call it in Japan, it would get really smelly, like even a day or two, and you're like, oh, okay, every time you open the bin, it's absolutely revolting. But that just doesn't happen anymore because there is no sort of namagomi in that bin. It's wonderful. So it all just goes in the compost, it goes outside, and inside smells a lot nicer.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, Natasha, once again. Great to see you. And she says they have green bins in Vancouver. And I know when I visited San Francisco, Recology, the garbage collecting service, they have a big recycling bin and they do composting. And he was saying you have more value to sell back the recycling materials when you separate out the compost because it's clean. And then you can get more money back from recycling centers when you're selling on the aluminum, when you're selling on the paper cardboard, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's been a lot of benefits that perhaps people don't see immediately, but yeah, it would be good to see more of that. I'm sorry, I've got a cat joining the conversation in the background.
That's okay. We always welcome cats in the conversation. We've got mine sleeping on the newspaper behind. Now, you also saw a bug-friendly initiative. Where was this at?
So this was in Kingston, just on the edge of London, and they called it a bug hotel. So we were just walking to the station one day, and I saw this, and it's brilliant. I mean, it was taller than me. It's not hard, maybe, but sort of quite a sizable box. But it's just on a little sort of snippet of green in between a couple of streets, where perhaps ordinarily there wouldn't be a lot of places for bugs to go and make their home. So here you can see there are lots of different sort of shaped openings on this. So it can be attractive to all kinds of bugs. So, obviously bees and things, solitary bees, which like going in little spaces. Some cats getting pretty noisy now.
It's brilliant. And this
yeah.
could be something we could add in park areas in Japan. We're having a big issue over the last 10 years of parks being completely concreted over because people don't want to deal with the trees dropping leaves and it looking messy. And I understand that. But we need parks with shade and trees and healthy insects is healthy people, right?
Exactly. But also a lot of the parks, I think, and beautiful gardens. I mean, there are some lovely ones in Tokyo, there are some lovely ones in London and Vienna and other places we saw. But the dead wood, that sort of anything that's chopped down or falls down is often cleared away, right? But that normally creates a habitat for a lot of bugs, and without that they struggle. It breaks the sort of critical piece in their life cycle if they don't have somewhere to lay their eggs or to raise their young. So providing little things like this, which doesn't take up a lot of space, you can have them anywhere, it can educate people around insects and what their role is. I think it's such a nice idea. It's interesting, it gets people involved, and it provides a space for the insects to continue their life cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah, very important to protect our insects, something we don't think a lot about. But I love that culture in Japan where kids go around in summer and they collect the beetles. And, there is that connection to education and insects and nature. And that's a wonderful thing about elementary schools in Japan, right? So we need to keep that going onto adulthood. Now, one thing, I was in Hawaii, so on August 6th, usually I go to the Hiroshima Day ceremony in Peace Park, but since I was in Hawaii, I went to Pearl Harbor and I wrote an article on Medium about it. I did a podcast about it because it was really impactful. And a lot of visitors to Hiroshima, they talk about Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, and Hiroshima as a consequence of that by getting the Americans in the war. So there is that connection in a lot of people's
Yeah.
minds. And it was really nice to go on August 6th. And then we saw there was a light up ceremony happening the next night. And so we went back, and they have this new sister historical peace park initiative between Hiroshima and Pearl Harbor, started by the ambassador to Japan and Hiroshima's mayor. And so they're starting to have these commemorations about Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Pearl Harbor. And it's so positive, and it's
Yeah.
such a good step forward, because the more we talk about each other's history and connect as people, trying
Yes.
to understand each other, that's the way forward, right? That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much. And on a similar vein, when we were in Austria, I was there with just my daughter looking at unis, and we went to this place, Mauthhausen Memorial Park, which is a former concentration camp. So it was the last Nazi concentration camp to be liberated at the end of World War II. And it was fascinating. I mean, obviously, it's not a sort of a happy, fun place to go, but it's incredibly powerful. And I was really pleased to go there with my daughter, who's 18 tomorrow. So just at an age where she is going out into the world. And these lessons that, we can learn from these places are so important. And I was so impressed with the way they were using it as well. So it wasn't just sort of walk around, look at pictures, see where things happened. The guide went around with us, and we were in a small group. And he was really he'd get to a sort of part of it, and he'd say, okay, what do you think this was used for? And so, for example, outside the walls, it was on top of a hill, really beautiful area with the river down below. And just outside the walls, there was a football pitch. And he said, okay, so, who do you think played football here? And it turns out it was the guards from the concentration camp had a professional team, and the people from the village used to come up and watch this. And he said, well, why do you think the people from the village then were happy to mix with the guards? Why do you think they didn't say anything? They could see the other side of the barbed wire just at the end of the football pitch, where they had the really sick people who were basically just sort of left to die. Why do you think, with this going on, that they felt it was okay to come watch a football game and didn't say anything? So it was really interesting to kind of reflect on what drives people to do things like this, and why people do or don't speak up and things like this. So it was quite a mixed group that we were with. It was really interesting to hear people's opinions there. And what was also brilliant was the guide says he spends a lot of his time working with school kids, because every school child in Austria has to go to, I'm not sure, just Mauthhausen, but one of these concentration camps as part of their education, and learn about what happened and say, this is our history. This is something we need to know about and not repeat. And there were also groups of young military personnel there who also come through. So it was really interesting to see how they were really leveraging this, being very open about, the mistakes of the past, and not carrying that forward, and not pointing fingers and blaming, but saying these were people who were following orders. How could they do this? And then they go home to their families afterwards. They were people like you and me. How does that happen? And how can we avoid that happening again? So it was really, really interesting to reflect on the psychology of it, and to understand what drives
And
behaviors, and to
to
learn.
own what happened in your
Yes,
country's past in a very
very much.
humble way, but
Yeah.
to move forward and hope it
Mm.
doesn't happen again. That's kind of
Yeah.
the philosophy of
Yeah.
Hiroshima as well. But
Yes.
I was really impressed when we went to Pearl Harbor. I was impressed by the guides who were preparing us before we went to the Arizona Memorial. And the guides would say, now remember where you are.
Mm.
Get this sense of place. This is not a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
This is a
Yeah.
memorial. This is where
Yeah.
so many people died. And
Mm.
so taking these ideas for when I do tours in Hiroshima, and
Mm.
trying to maintain that respect and
Yeah.
that sense of place and the ownership of what happened. I mean,
Mm.
Pearl Harbor as well as Hiroshima, maybe there's not enough ownership of
Mm.
what your country did
Yeah.
at that time, or
Yeah.
right. So in Pearl Harbor, there was just a tiny section about Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a as a way to end the war. That's really
Yeah.
how it was written. Like nothing about
Mm.
how many people died. But in
Yeah.
Hiroshima, are we honest about what happened in Pearl Harbor as well, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is a nice way to see how they have a collaboration and
Yeah.
hopefully can move forward with a more honest discussion, because that matters for the
Yeah.
future, right?
Very much, very much. Yeah, I was really impressed with the approach, and it sounds like, sort of really good things happening in Pearl Harbor there as well. And I would love to see this reflected more everywhere in the UK. More, if I think of what I learned about history growing up, there was nothing about a lot of the darker side of British history, say. And I think, it would be really, really good if we could, like you say, take ownership of that and learn about it, and then hopefully
Yeah.
not repeat those mistakes moving
But
forward.
the fact that these are tourist sites as well,
Yeah.
and these are often the top places to visit,
Yeah.
but we have to prepare visitors to be
Yeah.
mindful of where they are and have respect, because people come here to pray for people who died, and horrible dark events happened here, and it's not just Disneyland, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a really important way to, but it's not just the tourist's fault. We have to have guides, we have to have a way to prime them for that
Yeah.
mindful
Yeah.
experience, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now you had switching gears, you had Enteleco, you finished your report. Tell us a little bit about this.
Finally. So we had an event back in March, looking at the sort of connection between HR's role and sustainability, and how HR can get involved to sort of drive the embedding of sustainability into organizational culture. It was a great event. We had speakers from SK Group, Userbase, Unilever, NN Life, who am I forgetting? IKEA. Really great bunch of companies. And the report was written quite some time ago, and then we had to sort of obviously get all the approval from all the speakers' companies. And then things were just incredibly busy, and we didn't get around to getting it out. So finally, it is out. You can have a look at it on the website, download it. And what we would love is that people download this, read it, think about what they're seeing there, the different examples from the companies involved, and then use that to kickstart conversations in their own organizations, and think about, if you're an HR person or somebody involved in sort of organizational change, how can you use that sort of leverage point to embed sustainability into your company. So please take it away and use it, and we'd love to hear how you get on.
That's fantastic. I'll put the link, of course, below in all the show notes, but I'm just adding it now for people who are watching live to check out as well. That's wonderful to hear. It's, of course, it's about governance, it's about what consumers can do, but it's also definitely about what companies are doing, what companies can do. So these kind of events really make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
It's great. Natasha's last comment about in Canada, also, we need to be more honest about Indigenous, how the Indigenous people were treated.
Yeah.
And definitely, we need ownership of the past all over the world, for sure. Thanks for your comments. Yeah.
And maybe just adding on to that point. So, Natasha, it was great to see that comment. Thank you, because we've just kicked off our annual Sustainability Entrepreneurship program with working with young leaders for one of our clients. And we will be going to Montreal in Canada next month, in a couple of weeks' time, for the annual OneYoungWorld Summit. And every year, the summit, there are sort of 5 key themes, plenary themes. And one of them this year is Indigenous voices, which, of course, in Canada is recently, a very important, very public issue. And we're working with our delegates here last week in a workshop to look at sort of what areas of interest they have across these 5 different sort of core themes, and what they want to take on a project with, which they then have to pitch to their senior leaders at the end. One of the groups has chosen Indigenous voices, which actually we didn't expect, because it's not something you hear people talk about a lot in Japan. So we were quite surprised to hear them say, yeah, this is something we're really interested in. We want to know more. We want to do something about. So I'm really pleased to see that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we learn in Canada from Canada about their experience with this. And of course, how we can bring that back to Japan, because there are Indigenous voices here who are marginalized and not heard or supported. So
Absolutely.
yeah, looking forward to getting into that.
Oh, that's fabulous. I'm glad to hear that. Recently, since I came back, I had a chance to talk with Douglas Brooks. I talked to him before, but this time we were following up and talking more about his documentation of traditional Japanese wooden boat making in Japan. And he's doing projects around the world. He was in France at a boat maritime festival making a Japanese boat, and next to him was a Japanese team. He didn't know what was going to be there. He's hired to go to Spain to do Japanese Okinawan style boats. So he's really keeping the culture alive from his base in America, but teaching it to his students, studying with artisans and craftspeople here. So it was wonderful to talk to him. And then visiting Tokushima, there were so many connections to that, and how a lot of the craftspeople, like here you see traditional Japanese style beautiful umbrellas they're still making at the workshop there in this town, and it was wonderful to see. But they're saying the same thing you hear all over Japan. We do not have apprentices. We are not teaching this in the schools. So you're on the verge of losing all of this culture, and I see this over and over in Japan. But then we also visited a shoyu maker, and a young guy is taking over the family business and keeping the traditions alive.
Oh, fantastic.
And so that was great to see. Tokushima, they're also really active for their famous ama dancing. I heard you had it in Awa Odori in Tokyo recently, right?
Yes, it's that season,
there
isn't it?
are some positivity about how we can keep culture alive. How can we keep these things that we hold dear as part of Japanese traditions and culture? But we have to have the education. We have to have people making a living doing it to keep going, right?
Exactly. It can't be just a hobby, otherwise people can't keep going. But I mean, connecting back to the Indigenous voices, right? There's so much wisdom in a lot of these traditional crafts, and the techniques that they have, and often very circular and sustainable as well. There's a lot we can learn. So to lose it, not only be sad culturally, but I think we're losing potentially a lot of techniques, a lot of wisdom, a lot of things that we could be using going forward to sort of make our lives more sustainable now. So
one highlight of the trip I was so glad to see was the puppet making culture in Tokushima is still very much alive and very active with women. So many women, from young students at school learning how to do the puppetry to the older women who are the mentors, to middle-aged women who are going around house to house with the puppets, keeping the traditions of blessing houses and people alive, and like the puppets touching them as part of the blessing. I mean, it was just fascinating. And still so vibrant. And they had an American university professor who came over and was documenting and got so interested in it. He's now teaching at Tokushima University, helping them with the subtitles and everything. So it was like, you need that outside, inside enthusiasm. You need tourism. You need the experts and the academics from outside to come in and show that this is worth preserving, as well as you need people here. You need both, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's a great example. Wonderful.
It was so fun to see all of these puppets they control with 3 people. So it was absolutely fascinating to see how they do it. Yeah, it was really cool.
Wow. And when you think about the potential lessons from that on teamwork, on collaboration, it's about storytelling, which is, such an important part of getting people on board to make changes and things. So there's a lot to be learned from that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of tradition. We were just talking about how Hawaii is making incentives to have compostable containers. But one exciting thing I also saw in
Cool.
This is a bento box.
How gorgeous is that, right?
That's
And this is
amazing.
traditional Japanese bento box, which
Yeah.
is reusable. So
Mhm.
wouldn't it be such a great local and visitor appeal if we had shops in these areas who were actually selling bento? Would you like it in the reusable container? You pay 1,000 yen deposit. And then
Yeah.
you bring it back when you're done. Like, let's use what's already here, which is
Yeah.
beautiful and high value.
Yeah.
So that was great to see.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh,
Better than
wonderful.
compostable, right? Reusable is always better.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Oh, lots of positive examples. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And then hotel chain, just one last
Mhm.
thing I was excited to see. The hotel chain Daiwa Roy. So that was a Daiwa Roynet, vegan friendly, vegetarian friendly breakfast buffet. I was able to have a lot of variety of foods. They were making their own tofu as well,
Ooh,
which is
nice.
a
Yeah.
local product in Tokushima. And it was lots of plant based proteins. So you felt full, you felt satisfied, tasty. We need more of this. So it was great to see.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, good to see.
Well, that is our 30 minutes, Tova. We talked about a
Oh,
lot of topics. Great to catch up, and we'll do it again
likewise.
next month, I hope.
Brilliant. Yep. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, everyone, for joining, and have a great